Pastor Tim Keller, before he died, he actually would reach out to me on occasion and ask me to pray for certain people. And before he died, he called, and it was our last conversation, and he had a list of mutual friends that he wanted me to pray for and just to keep praying for them after he was gone. And we had a couple of conversations related to this topic, and for a couple of people that he asked me to pray for, who I would say they were better friends of his than I was friends with him. They interact with him on a much more regular basis. But we shared a concern, and he very much had it, that given the political climate of the day, that his concern was that a couple of these people were allowing their critics and the people who hated them to radicalize them. And it is a real danger that someone hates you so much, is so nasty to you, is awful to you, is regularly hostile to you, that their hatred of you begins to radicalize you, and you begin to change your views and values because of the hostility of other people. And you can understand how easy this can be to do when you see a bunch of people who are treating you horribly, even though you otherwise generally agree with them on stuff. And you think, well, if they agree with this stuff, maybe this stuff is wrong. Maybe if these are the people who claim to be standard bearers for these things I believe must be wrong. And you allow people, and don't say this can't happen to you. I see it happen all the time in politics, where I see liberals becoming conservative because they're not woke enough. I see conservatives becoming liberals because they're not woke enough. Woke right and woke left. And in my conversation with Tim, it was a couple of people who they were conservatives, but the Trump supporters treated them so horribly, so nasty, that they were letting the hatred of their critics radicalize them against their critics. And it had everything to do with how people were treating them that was changing their minds. And we see this more and more in society today, where people they will change their views based on who's on the other side. Jennifer Rubin, the dimwit who used to be at the Washington Post, is one of the best examples of this. Jennifer Rubin she tried to get me fired when I was at CNN because I explained one time, when she's very hard to pin down on issues, I said, you got to think of her more as Likud. And this was a friend of mine who is Jewish, and Jennifer Rubin is Jewish. He pointed this out, that her views align way more with Israeli politics at the time. And if you want to understand her, you need to understand that view. She's very socially liberal, but she's very pro-Israel, very defensive of Israel, and aligned with the Republican Party over Israeli and Jewish issues. Until Donald Trump became president, Jenn Rubin had for a long time advocated moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And the moment Donald Trump was the one who did it, Jennifer Rubin, surprise, was opposed to it. And essentially over her entire career, every position she staked out in bright lines, if Donald Trump sided with her on the issue, she rejected it. She was radicalized by her critics. She was radicalized by the other side. She allowed the other side to stake out positions, and she then went in the opposite direction. She didn't like them, therefore she couldn't take that position. A strongly held position she had for years, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. Donald Trump actually gets done what she wants done. She's like, this is a terrible idea. We should never move the American embassy to Jerusalem. And that's kind of a defining hallmark of Jennifer Rubin's career, is where Republicans are now is where she had been, but because they're there now, she's on the opposite side. You see this all the time. Think about Drag Queen Story Hour. Conservatives raised a fuss about certain urban areas of the country having drag queens go into libraries and do book time with kids. They found it odd. They found it offensive. That they found it to be subtle indoctrination. They opposed it. So what did the left do? They mandated it. In certain parts of the country, it was expected. Schools were bringing in drag queens. Why? Because if conservatives didn't like it, they needed to do it. That's what happened in Montgomery County, Maryland. They allowed conservatives to radicalize them. Ron DeSantis in Florida passed legislation that said we're not going to teach kids about sex until fourth grade. The left defined it as the don't say gay legislation, which wasn't true. To this day, there are progressives who are dogmatically convinced that the legislation was called the Don't Say Gay bill, or that, in fact, you couldn't talk about gays in kindergarten, which is explicitly not true. The legislation was designed so no sex ed in kindergarten, because there were progressive teachers who support trans values who insisted, I've got to teach the kids about this stuff. So they said, no, you can't do it. And the left, the media itself, grossly mischaracterizing the legislation that's been upheld by federal courts, by the way. In fact, it was so interesting to watch on television the legal scholars that were trotted on CNN. It's like, there's no way they'll allow this. This is content discrimination. They can't do this. And the court's like, yeah, you're not supposed to be teaching kindergartners sex anyway. You're teaching them reading and how to count, not sex. But Montgomery County, Maryland responded to these efforts in conservative states, particularly Florida, by saying, you know what? We're going to sexualize the hell out of kids. We're going to teach them about drag queens and BDSM and anal sex in pre-K. We're going to introduce them to the concepts of the trans community so that it becomes normalized for them. And in fact, you have a lawyer before the Supreme Court yesterday who admitted it was to influence the kids in what? A version of religion. Let's be real clear here. The alphabet gang amounts to a religious view. Natural selection, evolution, biology, Christianity all say we're male, we're female, and you can't change. It is a by-faith belief of secularists now that, yes, you can. There's no science to back it up, but they claim it is so. And they have taken their by-faith belief and they use it as secularism and say secularism isn't a religion, even though it is, and they're going to impose it on the kids. And so they want the Muslim kids whose parents believe Genesis, that God created male and female, made them male and female. And they're going to say, no, some people who are born male are actually female. And they're going to start this at an early age. They're going to introduce them to bondage, normalizing deviancy, normalizing bondage, normalizing drag queens, normalizing a host of things that Muslim families are offended by. And when the Muslim parents objected, they lumped them in with the white supremacists and the bigots, which are the Christians in Montgomery County, Maryland. The Christians were called the white supremacists and bigots, and they were opposed. The Montgomery County School Board was to the Muslim parents siding with the Christians. But it's not just being radicalized by where the right is on that issue. It's another issue as well. Immigration. Barack Obama actually repeatedly deported illegal aliens. But when Donald Trump became president and ramped up the effort to deport illegal aliens, the Democrats suddenly went all in on illegal aliens because they were radicalized by the right's position. Whatever the right's position was, they had to stake out the exact opposite position. And so here comes the right and says no to illegal immigration, and the left's like, hey, we're going to go get an MS-13 gangbanger out of El Salvador and bring him back here. Bill Malugin from Fox News, let me just read you this. This is in the show notes today. If you text data to 33777, you can get this. This is his exclusive at Fox News. The families of two teens killed by an illegal alien who crashed into them while drunk, high, and speeding at 100 miles an hour in Orange County in 2021 have been told by the state of California that their killer will be released from prison early in July, 3.5 years into a 10-year sentence for killing the teens who both burned alive in their vehicle. Oscar Eduardo Ortega Anguiano, a twice-deported Mexican illegal alien, had a lengthy rap sheet prior to killing 19-year-olds Anya Varfolomev and Nikolai Osikin in the DUI crash on the 405 freeway in Seal Beach in November 2021. Both were U.S. citizens. They were dating. Ortega Anguiano had several felony convictions, had gone to state prison, had multiple convictions for driving without a license, and was still on the streets when he crashed into the teen's vehicle. In spring of 2022, Ortega Anguiano was convicted in Orange County of 2 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated for killing the teens, and a judge sentenced him to serve a 10-year prison sentence for each count, but concurrently, meaning he'd serve both 10-year sentences at the same time. The victims' families felt that was already a weak sentence, but they tell me they were notified by the California Department of Corrections on Easter Sunday that the illegal alien is scheduled for early release July 19th, only a little more than 3 years into a sentence, leaving the victims' families shocked and outraged. The California Department of Corrections wouldn't confirm the release date, saying they cannot provide information on an incarcerated person's release date or location in advance of their release, and they added that incarcerated persons may earn credits for participating in rehabilitative programming. ICE is confirming to Fox News they have placed a detainer on the man with the California Department of Corrections and intend to take him into custody upon his release. They hope the California Department of Corrections will honor the detainer request and transfer him to their custody, but the families fear that they're going to let him go. Now, there's breaking news happening right now as I'm talking to you. The U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles has announced that he's charging this illegal alien with felony reentry and is going to seek to imprison him for up to 20 years once California releases him, to try to keep him in prison. But think about this. The state of California is so radicalized at the political level by the rights in opposition to illegal immigration that they've treated an illegal alien with kid gloves so often, despite multiple felony convictions, he was able to kill 2 teens in a car wreck. They burned alive in their car. They couldn't get out of the car. And they're letting him out of prison after 3.5 years. Y'all, this is an abomination of justice, and they have been radicalized by the right. They're not doing their own critical thinking. They're doing it because people on the right say one thing is bad, and therefore it must be good to them. People on the right are doing this as well, being radicalized by the other side. This is a postmodern phenomenon. You see, when we break down what the truth is, and you have your truth and I have my truth, we can define our truths by what the people we disagree with believe is true. And we can essentially give to them, outsource to them our critical thinking. So if they define something, we can go the opposite direction. It happens on both sides. But it's sad to me as a society for us to be at a point where when a political party, when a tribe stakes out a position, the people opposite say, well, I must take the opposite position, even if that opposite position is a moral abomination. And here we have multiple cases where the left has staked out positions that put them not just opposite the GOP, but opposite normal thinking Americans who do not think their pre-kindergarten child who's 3 years old needs to learn about BDSM, and opposite the families of victims of a criminal. This is how broken our society is. And again, at the bottom of this is a spiritual crisis. It's not a political crisis. It is a spiritual crisis where when you do not grasp the truth and you can have your truth can shift and be shaped by people on the other side.